What is up? It's your girl Ness, and we are back officially on YouTube. So I've been lazy. Clearly, it's been about 5-6 months. So we're just gonna start off from where we stopped. But before we start, like, comment, and subscribe. So, from where we left off, the day I was gonna tell my dad that I was pregnant, I had fallen asleep on the sofa. Sister upstairs, mom upstairs in her room. I completely knocked out. I passed out. I forgot because I was waiting until it was a good time just for me and him to sit down and talk. I didn't want anybody else around. But he was outside working on his car, and I went inside and ended up falling asleep. So about, I would say, 5:30, 6 o'clock, I woke up to my dad screaming my name, and I knocked out. So when I woke up, it took me a little to register what was going on. So when I got up to go to the kitchen, I looked, and he was on the floor screaming, and his face was all bloody. So I didn't know what to do. I just panicked. So I ran upstairs. My mom was in the room, but it didn't click to me to go to my sister's room. I just ran back downstairs. I woke up. I woke up. My daughter's dad, and went outside. I didn't see my dad, but I heard him screaming. So my leg was like all messed up at the time, so I managed to like run across the street from where we lived. My dad was on the floor, just bleeding, having trouble breathing. His hands, like, it wasn't even his hand. It was like his skin was hanging off. Like, it was that bad. The people that own the complex that we had lived in, my dad was under the car fixing it, and he had, I guess, approached my dad, and when my dad went to get up, he just hit him. So right then and there, my dad went in our house and tried to wake me up, and then he had asked my dad to fight. And my dad, he was a heavy drinker, as I said before, so like he was down with anything. So it didn't like click in his head to like just come inside or just leave it. So of course he went, and obviously he didn't do anything. It was the guy beat him up because my dad was so intoxicated. He didn't know what was going on. Like, he didn't know what was happening. So I ran to the house. I left him there, obviously, but there was somebody there. I didn't know who they were, but they were there with my dad. So I ran to the house. I called my brother instead of calling the ambulance because I was just in shock. I didn't know what to do. So I called my brother, and my brother said he was gonna call the ambulance and that he was on his way. I went to my house. My mom wasn't there. She had got up and left earlier before everything else happened. So I woke up my sister. My sister was knocked out as well with her boyfriend, so it was like, it wasn't, when she's a deep sleeper. So when I went back across the street to see my dad, the cops were already there, and instead of the cop helping him, he was arguing with my dad. And my dad was like, he was trying to talk, but he had so much blood coming out his mouth and choking. Instead of the cop helping him, the ambulance were right there too, but so instead of the cop helping him and letting my dad explain, he was just arguing with him because my dad managed, the guy that had beaten up my dad, he beat him up with a crowbar. So my dad managed to get the crowbar and take it, and the cop had, I guess, thought that it was my dad's fault. My dad started everything because he had it in his hand, and they didn't let my dad talk. And I was just sitting there screaming at him, like telling him, like, help my dad, like, what are you doing? They weren't listening to me either. So like, I was literally just crying and screaming. I didn't know what to do. They got him on the stretcher to go in the ambulance, and clearly they didn't let me go with him, so I was still in shock. I didn't know what to do. I was just crying and screaming. And at that point, when they took him away, I thought he was gone. So they took him to Hershey, and it was me, my mom, my sister, my daughter's father. We were all in the living room. My mom had just walked in, and she asked what was going on, and we told her, and she was in shock. So we all got into the car. I think it was, I don't remember, I'm not sure. It was either my brother or my daughter's grandmother, one of them two. They had drove us to the Hershey Hospital, and we had to wait in the hallway for a while so that my mom could see my dad. And when she finally got to see him, we were lucky. We were actually blessed that he was still alive, but he was in a coma for about, I want to say 2 to 3 weeks. So it was hard. And while he was in a coma, like, they managed to make a case against my dad, and of course everything got put on him. So when it was time for him to come home, when he finally came home not knowing how to walk. He couldn't walk, and he had to go to therapy to learn how to walk again. And his hand wasn't normal. It was his left hand. It was a metal hand. They couldn't save it. What they did was, it was still his skin, but he had like screws in his hands, like right here. He had screws, so like when he would go like that, like you could hear it when it was cold. But it was traumatizing. It really was, because I was there helpless. I couldn't do anything for him. Seeing that my dad was almost gone, and it was just traumatizing. So there was no way I could tell him I was pregnant after all that. So little by little, he learned how to walk, but he was just angry. And I'm guessing he was angry because of everything that happened. He was independent, so he needed help to get to the bathroom. If he wanted to go outside, he needed help. He couldn't drive. So like, he was just angry for everything. And he didn't take it on us. It was just, I wasn't used to seeing my dad like that. So that was about maybe a month and a half, a rough month and a half, seeing him helpless and not being able to do anything on his own. But it got to the point where he was able to walk, but he needed a walker, so it was getting better little by little. And that day, my aunt had came down from, I think it was Harrisburg, where she lived, and I thought it was just like a get-together thing. So I was like, whatever, okay, family's here. So I'm sitting in the living room hiding my stomach because the family didn't know, but her, she knew, and my mom knew. But the rest of the family, they didn't know. But there was people that was invited to come over for some reason. I didn't know what that reason was. So watching TV, and they called me over. They called me over outside. So we're outside, and they're like, instead of letting me tell him, they decided at that time, when he was helpless, when we were already going through a lot, they decided to tell him I was pregnant. And his head was down when they were talking to him. And when he looked up at me, when I tell you my soul came out my body, like, I was scared. Like, I didn't know what to do. I just stood there. And I looked at him. And I started crying because I felt like I was a disappointment because I'm his youngest, 15. And someone's sitting there telling them that their 15-year-old is pregnant. Like, imagine. So I just looked at him, and I was thinking about like stepping towards him to try to talk to him, but I see him getting up to struggle, and I flinched so hard, like I jumped back. And then he just looked at me and went inside. Like right there, like I knew I messed up. So, like I was crying. I didn't know what to do. I was just crying and crying. So I left. I went to my daughter's father's house. And my mom kept calling me and was like, you gotta come talk to your dad. You gotta come talk to your dad. But I was like terrified. Like, I mean, he couldn't run. He couldn't walk. But I knew like he would have found a way to get to me. So I tried to keep like as much distance as possible. But when he learned how to walk again, past week, he was able to walk. He didn't, like, I would try to talk to him, he would just walk by me like nothing. Like, he didn't notice me. So I was like, okay, well, I know where this is going. But a lot of family stopped talking to my mom and dad. Like, they just like stopped coming around, and I didn't know why. So one night, like, I couldn't take it anymore. I was in my room crying. Went outside for a little. I couldn't do it. So I went into the living room, sat next to him, and just looked at him and started crying. And I was like, I'm sorry. Like, I didn't know what else to say. And he just held me. He just held me so tight. And I just kept saying, I'm sorry. And he wasn't mad at me, actually. He told me that he was mad at himself. Because he didn't do his job. And I couldn't get any words out because I was just crying. So I just stood there. I just laid there on his chest. And just told him how sorry I was. And he was just like telling me how it's gonna be hard and everything else. He doesn't hate me. And that's what he said. It was just hard for him at first because his uncle, his brother told him that it was either kicking me out and letting me figure it out on my own, or if he would let me stay in the house, that he was done with us. And of course, my dad chose me, and I didn't know that. I should have knew that, but I didn't. So half of the family stopped talking and to my parents and stopped coming around because my dad chose me, of course, over them. So we're gonna stop there, and we will continue on to what would it be? Part 4. But remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you next time.